Greetings, friends. Welcome to this live stream by Empty Cloud Monastery. I'd like to begin as usual by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddhang Dhammang Sanghang Namasami. So welcome to everyone who's joining live this morning, afternoon, evening, and everyone who comes and watches this teaching later on. Topic of this session is right inclination, referring to a couple of suttas in Majjhima Nikaya that are teaching us how to incline the mind in a fruitful, in a wholesome direction. So this is a really beautiful theme, noting that and appreciating that so much of our practice is in the day-to-day, nitty-gritty, mundane, everyday life, friends. And, countering the mistake that we can make that certain path aspects are more important than others. Meditation is very important for us to train the mind, to purify the mind, to give us some peace, some quietude, some solitude, to be able to get to know this mind and body deeply, thoroughly, in order to be able to scour and cleanse and sort of purify, to root out the defilements. Meditation is very important. But really, our everyday lives are giving us this incredible mirror, aren't they? To really be able to reflect back and see, how is it? How are we functioning? What is the state of mind? Are there any defilements playing out? And one another, the human community, the Sangha, we give each other this wonderful gift of our wise gaze towards one another. And even when we're with people who are, not so reflective, not really interested in pursuing a spiritual path, actually quite happy to even delight in unwholesomeness, to, make much of their abilities, their power to exercise agency in the world, not necessarily for good, but sometimes for harm. Even when we're with such people, everything's teaching us, everything we can reflect back and see how this one is responding. How are we, charting our course between the wholesome and the unwholesome, this great field of practice, of experience. And it keeps us alive in the practice to be reflecting in such a way, as I'm going to be discussing today, to be really awake to our manifestation in the world. And of course, for this, we need community, we need one another, we need human interaction. And so to meditate is very wonderful, and it is an important path factor for us. Developing samadhi, developing mindfulness, developing right effort in our meditation practice, but also, and importantly, when we're not meditating, which is most of the time after all, for most of us, the practice continues. The practice needs to be one of consistent attention, vigilance, at all times, to observe, to maintain that degree of mindfulness and right attention that is observing and aware of our every move, our every thought, our every word, and our every deed. And so I find Majjhima Nikaya number 8, this beautiful Saleka Sutta, very, very helpful. Something to reflect upon frequently, to kind of remind me of all the possible ways in which the mind can veer off course, and also to get into a right perspective, the relationship between solitude, meditation practice, the inner work, the centering that we can do in our meditation practice, and the relationship with the world around us. And it's so beautiful that the Buddha covers all of this, every way in which we experience the world and experience life. It's all covered in the teachings of the Buddha. It's all important. There's not a moment when we lose out on the possibility of liberating our hearts from suffering, friends. So this Saleka Sutta, it's called effacement in Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. Effacement, Saleka, sam, lick. Lickety means to scratch, with scratching. But what it really means, Saleka, is the wearing away, the scratching away, the polishing away, the freeing ourselves gradually is the sense you get, the scratching away of the defilements. How do we continually clean up our ways of manifesting in the world? That is, root out the defilements consistently. And this sort of gives us beautiful insights into how to do this. It's a dialogue between a monk called Mahachunda and the Buddha himself. That takes place, I think, in Savatthi. Mahachunda's Sariputta, the great disciple of the Buddha, is his brother. Funnily enough, last time I was here 2 weeks ago, I was speaking about the other sutta where Mahachunda appears, where he was visiting with Sariputta, with his brother, visiting Channa, the monk who was terminally ill. And here Mahachunda appears again. In this context, he's most likely, we can gather, and we're told in the commentary, there's a distinct possibility that he was surrounded by a whole load of his disciples. So all the great Arahant monks around the Buddha had their own, often very large groups of followers who were learning from them. And in this way, the Buddha's dispensation was spread out all around northern India, modern day northern India. So there were many, many great teachers, great arahants, who were teaching many new and less experienced monastics. And Mahachunda was asking questions here in Saleka Sutta. He's asking the Buddha a number of questions, and no doubt in order to help his students, his disciples, to find their way on the path of practice. And so Mahachunda's already an arahant in this sutta, but he is asking the Buddha, how is it that one can understand not self, understand and overcome the delusion of self? How is it that we can practice in this way? And how should we practice in order to liberate our hearts from suffering? And the impression you get, and the commentaries tell us, that some of these disciples of Mahachunda may have been kind of falling short, settling for less than complete liberation. They may have been overestimating themselves, considering that they'd already done the work, job done, when actually they're still learners. And this is very helpful for all of us, because we can sometimes fall into this sense of not really understanding where we're at on the path of practice. and getting caught up perhaps in the pleasant and the peaceful experiences that we can have as a result of progress on the path, as a result of meditation practice. We can get a bit complacent, when, for instance, when we go to meditate, it's very peaceful, the mind is quiet. We can enter into states of one-pointedness where we experience a lot of bliss, a lot of well-being, a lot of peace, tranquility, equanimity. And we may have great insights into the nature of reality through our meditation practice and feel we've got it, we've done the work. It's wonderful what we've been able to experience, good enough. And yet, we may find later on that we're getting angry with somebody, we're getting frustrated, we're experiencing ill will, we're greedy, we're desirous all over again. And yet, if the conditions are very good, I suspect that for the monastics at the time of the Buddha, the alms would have been available, lodgings would have been available, the teachings were there. There may have been some easefulness in their situations and the possibility of dwelling, inclining the mind more and more to dwelling in blissful states, peaceful states, may have been an issue. It certainly comes up many times in the suttas, this problem of overestimation, of falling short, of settling for less than complete liberation of the heart from all suffering. So here there is great possibility that the students of Mahachunda were not quite on course for liberation, were veering off on tangents in their meditation practice. So the Buddha speaks here about the danger of immersing in the jhana. He speaks about the 8 jhana, all the possible ways in which the mind can become very one-pointed and experience peace and insight. And B, actually in other suttas, the Buddha speaks about the jhana as part of the path, very important aspect of our practice. We can be free from Mara. The Buddha describes the jhana practice as the blindfolding of Mara. So there's no possibility, friends, when we're experiencing samadhi, states of concentration, peaceful meditation, we can come to places, to the jhana, where there's no possibility of any defilement arising in the mind. We're free to that extent. This is a wonderful thing. But here in Saleka Sutta, the Buddha is saying to these monastics, don't settle for the peace of jhana, because this is a limited and a worldly, a conditioned peace. It's a conditioned, sometimes pleasure, blissfulness, or peacefulness. This is conditioned, this is subject to conditions. This is not the way to immerse, to dwell, to incline the mind in this direction. There is something missing when this is the only practice that's being done. So yeah, we're free from defilements while we practice jhana, or while we're having experience of peaceful meditation, some degree of one-pointedness. But here the Buddha's telling us, this is what we should be doing. We should be practicing saleka, effacement. We should be investigating the mind and heart constantly, consistently throughout our day, to look for the flaws, to look for the defilements. And this is what the Buddha says. He says, don't mistake the pleasant or the peaceful for purity. He says, now effacement should be practiced by you all. Others will be cruel. We shall not be cruel here. Others will kill living beings. We will not do that. They will take what is not given. We will not take what is not given. Others will be uncelibate. We will be celibate for the monastics, friends, or we will have an avoidance of any kind of sexual misconduct. Others will speak falsely. We will not lie or deceive. Others will speak maliciously. We will speak kindly, gently, in such a way that we promote harmony and concord amongst others and within ourselves. Others will speak harshly. We will speak gently, in such a way that we don't offend, not coarsely, in a refined way, in a cultivated way, in a way that people are happy to hear us, courteously. Others will speak, will gossip. We will abstain from gossip. We will only speak truthfully, I would say on Dharma, speak on things that are of value to others and to ourselves, promote wholesome qualities, not to engage in a lot of talk about the crazy world we live in, friends, to find ways to only use our speech for development for ourselves and others. It's not to neglect the world around us, it's rather to extract what is of value and to be willing to not go there, not speak on, be silent around that which may stir up disharmony, that which may confuse the minds of others or ourselves, that which is disharmonious. So here I'm in the middle of speaking on the Kusala Kamapatthas. This is the 10 causes of wholesome action. So here the Buddha is saying, we need to incline our minds, first of all, away from cruelty. That is, of course, towards compassion. So in all our activities, in all our day-to-day life, can we have a consideration? Can we have a kind of background affect? Cultivate a sense of compassion. Compassion for ourselves, compassion for all those around us, compassion for the situations around us, compassion for all that we take in, see, hear, smell, taste, touch, or think. That's the first way in which the Buddha encourages us to incline our minds toward compassion, away from cruelty. And then the 10 courses of wholesome action, so to incline our minds consistently away from harm, away from taking what we're not really entitled to, towards sexual good conduct, respect for our relationships, care, honoring the commitments that we make, stepping away from any unwholesome intentions or desires that we may have. In terms of speech, the speech that promotes harmony, that's refined, that's polite, that is honest and sincere, and that is avoiding any low talk, any unprofitable, unbeneficial speech. And the rest of the Kamapatthas, these 10 courses of wholesome action, are the 3 aspects of mind. So the Buddha says we should incline our minds consistently away from covetousness, away from greed, away from lusting or desiring. That is to open our hearts to satisfaction, to contentment, rather than wanting to grasp things, to give things away. Cultivating generosity, cultivating contentment. And also to others, maybe exercising minds and hearts of ill will, we will not do that. So to avoid ill will, to incline the heart then towards loving kindness, wishing others well. May they all be well, whoever, wherever, whatever the judging mind may think about others, may they be well, may they thrive, may they be happy, may they be at peace. And finally, to avoid wrong view. Others may be of wrong view, we will not be of wrong view. Now, friends, in all of these encouragements from the Buddha, it's very interesting to note that when he's encouraging us to incline our minds towards these wholesome qualities, he's also pointing out that others may not be cultivating in the same way. And so where others may fall short, we will not follow that way. We will not incline in that direction. So this is something very important, that we are perhaps going against the current oftentimes when we are following the Buddha's teachings and inclining our minds toward the wholesome in our everyday lives. We may find that we are really pushing against tides, streams, currents of unwholesomeness. And we can feel this, maybe in the workplace, maybe in our family life, maybe in the attitudes of our culture, of all the people around us, even en masse. Isn't it the case that people can be very deluded? There can be a lot of cruel attitudes. Oftentimes, what comes to my mind is the way that we are conditioned to look out for our own, care for our own family, or it may be extend as far as community, may even extend to our nations, our cultures, our ways of doing things. We may have a great sympathy and care for all those who are like us, basically. But when it comes to people far away who are very different, who have very different ways of thinking and doing things, we may not have so much sense of connection, sympathy, or care. And this is something that the Buddha really invites us to investigate. And let's remember, the qualities of compassion and loving kindness are universal. They're not picking and choosing, they're not discerning in that way. And this is the way for us to cultivate our relationships with the world around us, for sure. And so others may have attitudes that are tinged with aversion or prejudice. This is something we can be constantly aware, vigilant, careful to notice, to scratch away, to efface anything in our cultures, in our wider, communities that may be noticeable here as unwholesome. Any attitudes, any views, any ways of behaving. I think of also things like the way that people very commonly are a little bit dishonest, dishonorable in everyday life. Little ways in which we are slightly less than fully truthful, filling in forms just in order to not have to bother with all the nitty-gritty details, but rather just to get it done. In the workplace, ways in which we might cut corners or slightly fall short in terms of authenticity, sincerity. This is something to be very aware of and to always remember what's important is to incline our minds for freedom, for liberation. That is to incline our minds to the good, to honesty. Honesty is fundamental. Sincerity, integrity, fundamental to our practice and our spiritual path. So going on. So the Buddha here is pointing out, others may fall short, but we will be very careful to incline our minds in these ways. So the ways I've spoken about so far, the 10 courses of wholesome action, the Buddha brings in non-cruelty, that is compassion. And he goes on to speak about all of the path factors. Others may have wrong view, we will not have wrong view. Others may have wrong intention, we will have right intention. And so on through all the path factors, right speech, right action, right livelihood, right concentration or stillness, right mindfulness, right effort. So this is an encouragement for us to recognize that the path factors, the Eightfold Path factors are every day, in every moment, in every aspect of our lives. They are relevant for us. We know this. It's a reminder to keep noting, to keep conscious of the path factors in our lives. He also brings in the second two last factors of the path, that is the arahants, knowledge and deliverance. Right knowledge and right deliverance, we will be working towards complete understanding and freedom. And there are those who may be working, moving, inclining in other directions. That is most people, friends. So when we're surrounded by people en masse who are inclining their hearts towards different values, different goals, then we can remember to continually consider, what is our goal? What is the aim of our lives? What is our direction? Right knowledge and right deliverance. This is our goal. This is our direction. The Buddha goes on to speak about the hindrances. Others may incline towards, he's already mentioned, desire and aversion. And he brings in, others may incline towards sloth and torpor, towards restlessness, towards doubt. We will incline our hearts towards energy, right effort, or avoiding restlessness, that is focus, simplification, meditation. And we will incline our minds towards the dispelling of doubt. That is not to prevaricate, not to proliferate around path, but just to walk the path, to take in the Buddha's teachings and put them into practice, to not allow ourselves to live in our heads, circling endlessly around, considering this, considering that, to simplify, to be willing to let all that cogitation go and to come back to the ground, the earth, this mind and body. Keep practicing mindfully in this way. The Buddha then goes on to speak about all the upakulesa, or almost all of them. That is the imperfections that defile the mind. These defilements, friends, the Buddha names with an encouragement for us to consider, investigate, ask ourselves, question ourselves, repeatedly. Is this manifesting for me today? Has this quality been present in any way, shape or form? And these upakulesa the Buddha describes are, others will be angry, we will not be angry. Others will be resentful, we will not. Others may be contemptuous, we will not fall into contempt, contemptuousness. Others will be insolent, we will not be insolent, rude, looking down on others, putting ourselves on a pedestal. Others will be envious. We will not be envious. They will be avaricious. We will not be avaricious. Mean-hearted, stingy. Others will be fraudulent. We will be scrupulously honest. Others will be deceitful. We will not. Others will be obstinate. We will not be obstinate. We'll be flexible, malleable, ready to step down, ready to change our view or to listen to the views of others without obstructing them, reacting to them. Others will be arrogant. We will not be arrogant. So here, these qualities are for us to consider and keep questioning, because we may have certain defilements in the mind from time to time that we're not aware of. That's why these suttas are so valuable, for us to question, to consider what we may not have considered before. Am I an envious person? I may not wish to consider this. I may have an inclination, a very natural inclination to just brush that question aside. Of course not. That's not me. With all of these qualities, it asks us to face up and humbly, scrutinize the heart and see, well, maybe there is some envy. Maybe I do get envious of others. Maybe there is jealousy. Can I find any instances of that? And to give it time, to give some time and space to this kind of investigation, to this kind of scrutiny. It really behooves us, so that we're not just on autopilot following our karma, but rather we're actively engaged in searching for the defilements. Some of us are so assailed by defilements, friends, that we don't need to look very far, very hard. They're right here for us. We're reactive. We get angry. We get irritable. We're fed up. We're envious, jealous, and so forth. But for others, maybe some of you may find that life is quite good. You're very contented. You're generous. You're open-hearted. You're non-judgmental. Your meditation is very peaceful. All's going well. It is in such cases, friends, that it's important to not rest back on the laurels, but rather to do this kind of searching, so that these defilements that may be hidden away can be scratched away at, can be polished, can be worn away. This whole sutta really is an invitation to investigate whether there's complacency in the practice and to energize the practice by observing, by searching, by looking for the defilements wherever they may be found. The Buddha goes on, after speaking of the upakilasas to be investigated. Is there anger, resentment, contempt, insolence, enviousness, avarice, fraudulence or deceit, obstinacy or arrogance, anywhere to be found in this heart and mind? In any behaviors? Can I remember any incidents of this to investigate, to search, to scrutinize? The Buddha then speaks of, there are those who are difficult to admonish. There are those who have bad friends. There are those who are negligent. I will not be difficult to admonish. I will not have bad friends. I will not be negligent. Let us consider if there are any aspects here for us to investigate. How is it when we get feedback? How do we receive it? Are we grateful, considering it to be like a treasure, more valuable than any material treasure, to be able to receive input from others that can help us to be guided to greater well-being, greater happiness. Do we receive feedback in that way? Do we ask for feedback? Do we open to feedback? Are others aware that we're open to feedback? Or on the other hand, are we reactive? Do we criticize those who give us feedback? Do we immediately direct our attention to their faults? This is something to consider. It is good to be open to feedback and to let others know that we appreciate any feedback they might give us. We will receive it fully and gratefully. Do we have bad friends? Are there people around us we associate with, we spend our time with, who are not practicing in this way, not interested in effacement, in wearing away the defilements? This is not to divorce ourselves from people who are suffering. This is not to neglect people who may benefit from our friendship, but it's to be discerning, because we're very influenced, aren't we, friends, by others. We're coming here together to speak on Dharma and explore the teachings of the Buddha. This is very helpful. This actually promotes our well-being and supports us on the path of practice. We can ask ourselves, do we spend time with others in ways that are not encouraging us on the path of practice? Are we allowing ourselves to immerse in less than wholesome qualities when we're with certain others? Let's look at that. We don't have to ignore people, but we can be very conscious, very careful, very guarded, looking after our hearts when we're with others who may have an influence on us that is not completely wholesome. Are we negligent? How much of our attention, how much of our energy do we devote to practice? How aligned are we with the path of practice? How much do we care for Nibbana? How much do we wish to be free from suffering? We can ask ourselves this, because often in asking this question, we can actually find our true inclination. This inclination of the heart toward freedom is natural. I would say it's like our human birthright. It's like this is all of us, every being, everyone is seeking happiness. And what is the highest happiness? Well, it is liberation of the heart. So when we investigate how much are we actually inclining our hearts in the direction of Nibbana, then we will oftentimes find that this hones our right intention. It provides us with more support for what is in our best interests. So questioning, am I negligent or am I devoted to this path of practice? So all of this, friends, all of this advice from the Buddha to investigate these qualities, the unwholesome qualities, focusing on the unwholesome and wearing it away, scratching it away, effacement. This is the work of this sutta, this teaching. And clearly the Buddha was speaking to these disciples who were not doing that work, but rather who were enjoying the fruits of their meditation practice. So let's remember and consider the teachings in Saleka Sutta. And I do really recommend reading through and noting all these qualities, these unwholesome qualities, considering the other side, considering their positive aspects. For example, where the Buddha speaks about, is it stinginess? Just checking the word in Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation. Avariciousness. When we're looking at avarice, is avarice present for me? We can note that the converse, the other side of that, is generosity, open-handedness, open-heartedness. So for each of these qualities, we can see there is the positive aspect that is to be developed. Later in this sutta, the Buddha goes on to say that our inclination of the mind towards these positives and away from these unwholesome qualities is something we can use as fuel for the journey. So allow the positives to eclipse the negatives. He says, suppose there was an uneven path and another even path by which to avoid it. Suppose there was an uneven ford and another even ford by which to avoid it. So, in this way, use the wholesome to overcome the unwholesome. So when we find ourselves subject to, let's say, anger, let's remember in that moment, anger's like the rough road, the rugged road, the difficult road, or the ford that's hard to cross. Let's remember, what is the way out of anger? To consider non-anger, to consider peacefulness, goodwill, friendliness. And just to bring this to mind, we're stepping from the rocky road to the even path, the even road, to the ford that's easy to cross. So even in those moments when we're assailed with an unwholesome quality, let's remember its converse. And it's wonderful to play with this, friends, to consider what is the opposite of ill will. How can I feel that? When there's ill will in the heart, there's hatred, there's dislike or irritability, can I just remember there is such a thing as goodwill, loving kindness, a willingness to live and let live, non-reactivity, whatever qualities come to mind as the way out and the converse to the defilements that we're experiencing. It is wonderful to incline the mind, even in those moments when we're steeped in negativity, defilements of one kind or another, to remember that the way out of our immersion in these defilements is to grow their opposites, cultivate the wholesome qualities, and let this road of wholesomeness take us away from the mire of unwholesomeness, the places where we're stuck. You may think it's impossible to do that when I'm angry, when I'm hateful. It's very difficult to not be that, but we can. We can remember the Buddha's teachings. We can have that degree through our practice over time, through these teachings, that degree of space, that degree of distance, that objectivity grows and grows for us, doesn't it, friends? So that we can, even in the midst of anger, of heat, of fear, of hatred, even in the midst of the upswelling of these defilements, we can bring to mind, there is another way, and that is the way that I wish to follow. That is what I wish to cultivate. And inclining the mind thus becomes natural for us. And we get quicker and quicker at it, to such an extent that when there's anger, the patience can very quickly come in. The willingness to be mindful of the body can very quickly come in. The willingness to bring up a good wish towards ourselves, and possibly even towards the source of our anger as we're perceiving it, can come in. This becomes very energetic, very vibrant, very alive. This practice, our practice, moment by moment, we're so vigilant and so alert when we're practicing in this way. So using the wholesome to lead us out, to clear the way, to find our path. The Buddha goes on to say, Chunda, just as all unwholesome states lead downwards and all wholesome states lead upwards, So too, we have the wholesome to lead us up and out of the unwholesome states. The Buddha goes on to say, one who is themselves sinking in the mud, that they can pull out another, that is impossible. But one who is not sinking in the mud, that they can pull out another, this is possible. One who's untamed or undisciplined, unextinguished, that they can tame another, this is not possible. But one who is taming themselves, disciplining themselves, extinguishing the defilements for themselves, that they can tame another, this is possible. This reflects back on the teaching the Buddha is giving, our way of investigating the defilements in this sutta, where others may be steeped in the unwholesome and not striving to extricate themselves from that unwholesome. We will not do that. We will strive, we will incline our minds towards the wholesome. And in the same way, here the Buddha is saying, when there is that inclination, when there is that practice, that is when we can be of benefit to others. We can't be of benefit to others, to the world, if we're steeped in the defilements. Our work, friends, of changing the world, of making the world a better place, of making a difference, is to do this inner work of purifying, of inclining the mind toward the wholesome. That is the work. And the results follow on from this practice. It's not possible for us to put anything good into the world without this work happening. This is the way. And so for me, this is very valuable as a teaching, that we can't change the world through striving and arguing and fighting and finding fault with the world. Rather, we can change the world for the better through purifying this heart and mind. This is a full-time job. If we focus on this and we continue to incline our minds towards the wholesome, then our impact, our influence, our way of manifesting in the world will be all that we would wish it to be. It's very poignant for me that when I was a student, I was quite an activist before I became a monastic. If I wasn't a monastic, I would certainly be an activist in this day and age. But what I noticed was that both for myself and so many people around me, there was a lot of suffering, a lot of overwhelm, very difficult to maintain one's equilibrium when we're confronted again and again by injustice, by all the unwholesomeness in the world around us. So much that is wrong, so much that is cruel, so much that is wicked. And so I've learned through the Buddha's teachings and this practice that step number one for anyone who wants to help is to do this inner work, to purify the heart from suffering. And in the process of doing this, yes, this is a way in which we can support. This is a way in which we can extend our compassion, our loving kindness, and any action that could, should, needs to happen comes from this place. It must come from a place of peace, from a place of goodwill, from a wholesome place. So this beautiful sutta ends with the Buddha saying, these teachings have been given with compassion. These are the huts, these are the empty places, meditate. So that's also interesting because the Buddha here has been speaking about how we manifest in the world and how we very vigilantly search for and root out the defilements, wearing them away, bringing in their positive aspects of these qualities to help us to extricate ourselves from the negative. And then he exhorts those disciples who've perhaps been practicing jhana, who've perhaps been getting a bit complacent, to continue to meditate. meditate. In this way, we can do the investigation. So for all of us, friends, it's really good to have a practice, a meditation practice on a daily basis, an hour, 2 hours, however much time you can afford, and then to integrate this with our day-to-day life, with our life as social beings, with our relationships, with our work, with all that we do, say, and think in our lives, moment by moment. I wanted to speak about another sutta. As usual, I've gone a little bit over time with my enthusiasm for Majjhima number 8, which is truly a significant, really important sutta for us. I'm just going to mention Majjhima 114 is another sutta that's speaking about how we need to incline our minds on the path of practice. It's Sewitabha Sutta. It's the inclination of the mind, that which is to be cultivated and that which is not to be cultivated. So Majjhima 114 is a very similar theme to Majjhima number 8. Now, just briefly, the Buddha speaks here in a very simple way, actually, what should be cultivated and what should not be cultivated. It's very simple, friends. What should be cultivated is the wholesome, and what should not be cultivated is the unwholesome, or that which leads to the unwholesome. So the Buddha says, you should not cultivate that which causes unskillful qualities to grow, while skillful qualities decline. And you should cultivate that which causes skillful qualities to grow, while unskillful qualities decline. This is how it works, isn't it? Just as in Saleka Sutta, if we incline toward the wholesome, we're moving away from the unwholesome. We're scraping away and scratching away at the unwholesome and deleting it. The Buddha in this sutta, Sewitabha Sutta, he speaks about bodily, verbal, and mental behavior. Let's look at what's wholesome and what's unwholesome here. He speaks about thoughts, perceptions, and views. Consider the wholesome, let go of the unwholesome here. In terms of our aspirations, we can note that which is wholesome and those aspirations which are not wholesome for us, which are not supporting us on the path of practice. He speaks about all the input through the sense doors: sight, sound, smells, taste, touches, thoughts, and ideas. Let's consider, what is wholesome? What am I taking in? Is it wholesome or unwholesome? If it's unwholesome, let me disincline the mind towards that. Let me incline the minds towards wholesome input. And he speaks about for the monastics, but really for all of us, he speaks about in terms of robes, alms food, lodgings, places where we find ourselves, and the people we find ourselves surrounded by. In relation to all of these, the requisites, that is our places where we live, and the ways we earn money for the lay folk, the food that we choose to eat, the places we frequent, and the people that we spend our time with. In all of these ways, let's keep scrutinizing, let's keep awake to what is wholesome and what is unwholesome, and disincline towards that which is unwholesome, that is not helping us, that's not supporting our practice. Incline towards the wholesome in all these aspects of our lives. He says at the end of this sutta, Majjhima 114, if the whole world, with its gods, its maras, its divinities, gods, divine beings, ascetics, Brahmins, human beings, if all of us, if the whole world was to understand the detailed meaning of my brief statement in this way, it would be for the whole world's lasting welfare and happiness. Thus it is that we can support and contribute and allow goodness in this world, friends. So may we keep striving. May we keep investigating. May we focus our attention on rooting out, wearing away the defilements. Let's not waste a moment. Life is very short and very precious. And this work is the most fruitful, most auspicious, most valuable way to spend our time and energy. Awam. Thank you very much for your kind attention, friends. I put in the suggested reading in the chat. These 2 suttas, please have a look at them. I've barely touched on them. There's so much more, but basically to consider the wholesome and the unwholesome, and this wish that we all have to incline our minds towards the wholesome is the theme of these 2 suttas. So friends, I'm looking at the chat now, seeing your very kind greetings. Hi Rebecca, Manal, Margaret, Geetha, Madeline. All's well, and I hope all's well with you too, Madeline. Niranjan, Nay Nara, Jayantha. Sadhus to you, Jayantha. Norma, hello from Florida. Wonderful that you're with us this morning. Sud, JD Smith from Australia. Wonderful you're with us this evening. Monkol, John, Maria from Nova Scotia. Good morning. A Thai friend who gives a number as their name. Welcome. Ronald, so many. I'm going to, friends, sorry if I've missed you out. Thank you for dropping something into the chat. I'm going to focus on any questions or comments, okay, in the last bit of time we have. Yeah, nice one, Madeline says. Exactly, Madeline. We should copy out these instructions and stick them up on the wall to remind ourselves about how the Buddha instructs us. Absolutely. You know, I really fell into the danger when I was younger, got into meditation, absolutely loved meditating. I got into the dangerous trap of just really inclining the mind and heart towards the peace of practice through meditation, and the rest of the world I wasn't interested in, you know. And I had to learn, you know, over years. I didn't realize, you know, that this was an inclination of the mind that was not serving me well. So it took a long time to kind of bring it back to the middle way, to the center. And this sort of helped me so much in this, because it is this, what we could, in some foolish way, consider to be mundane, to be everyday life, not so important. This is so not the case. The Buddha again and again pointed out, it's our every thought, word, and deed that count on this path of practice, and we need to continually scrutinize in this way, to look at these qualities, these human qualities, and to become very adept at observing how we are behaving, how we're manifesting, because sometimes it can be the case that we're observing our behavior and only then do we realize the mind state that's behind that behavior. You know, there's so much to investigate here, friends. So thank you, Madeline. I agree. Put these qualities on the wall, consider them again and again, and see how much we can learn about path, about this mind and body, about human nature, how much we can profitably investigate, and all the while with this inclination of mind towards path, towards goodness, you know, towards the wholesome. Thanks, Madeline. Okay, Rebecca says, these are going to have to be very short answers. I'll do my best to give you a pithy answer that's helpful, Rebecca, if I can. When training in everyday situations, Rebecca says, the mind can take a turn towards heaviness and self-focus that feels constricted. How do I keep the mind light and balanced while practicing in the nitty-gritty? That's lovely. Thank you for this. Yeah, if it starts to feel heavy and introspective in ways that are not helpful, that are bringing you down or feeling like you're missing something, then I would say to bring in a heart of loving kindness, the quality of metta, or the quality of compassion, compassion for this feeling of constriction, to bring in these divine abidings. They are by their very nature expansive states. They are immeasurable states, and so they can bring in a lot of space and light. So just to remember loving kindness, may I be well. To open up, take a deep breath, open the eyes wide, maybe look at the sky and bring in some compassion. May I be free from suffering in this way. This is my suggestion to you. And Sud says, though we listen to these teachings, the mind tends to fall back into these unwholesome tendencies. Would it help to chant this sutta every day? Why is the mind so difficult to train? Yeah, I would say Madeline's advice to pop up the list is a really good one. Or you can learn all these qualities. The Pali, it's very interesting to investigate the Pali words actually. There's a lot of depth there, a lot of possible translations. You can explore the scope of each word in terms of these qualities, which will help further with the elucidation, the investigation of these qualities. That's one thing. Why is the mind so difficult to train? Yeah, good question. Because of greed, hatred, and delusion. So we are in the mud, friends, until we're not, and we're trying to get out. That's why we come and listen to the Dharma, isn't it? That's why we take in suttas. That's why we practice to purify our hearts. It's a process. One thing for sure, as Master Eckhart said, even if we don't have the longing in every moment for freedom, at least we can long for the longing. We can just do our best to incline towards right intention, to incline our minds toward the good. Just that much. And we're helping ourselves enormously. And we have sometimes to battle with our ignorance, with our aversion, and with our desire. Let's not beat ourselves up. Let's not add to our suffering. Let's just be aware this is the conditioning. This is the karma. I can make it good. I can turn it around. But this word saleka, the meaning, is so helpful for us because the sense is that we scratch away, we rub away, we wear away gradually these defilements. Let's be glad that we can do that and keep going, Sud. And there's always time and space for loving kindness. When we feel despondent and like we're getting nowhere, we're not good enough, let's again bring in the qualities that lighten our load, that brighten our minds, compassion and loving kindness. Thank you, Sud. And crumbs. Okay, I think I can cover these two more comments. Thank you, friends. One from Manal. On the subject of being more clear about short-term goals, how can we develop this plan and what should we consider? At times I become engrossed in the day-to-day application of the Dhamma, that I'm concerned that goals become unclear. Thank you, Manal. Yeah. Short-term goals. Well, I sort of think what comes to my mind anyway is that we can maintain right intention, and it's both long-term and short-term. The long-term goal is freedom from all suffering, but the short-term goal is really very similar. It is to avoid harm, to do good, and to purify our hearts. They are integrated, they align with one another. I would say that in a sense there's no time even in this practice of path. It is to simply set our compass, set our direction towards right intention, and follow, develop, cultivate all the path factors, rub away, wear away the defilements. Let that be both your short-term and your long-term aim. And in every moment, there will be a sense of which way to move, which direction to move in, how to respond, if that right intention path factor is at the forefront. I hope that's helpful, Manal. And sorry, I can't say more. And finally, Christopher says, thank you, Christopher. For Management 8, there's no need for monastics to dwell in forest, external austerities, examples eating very little, wearing rag robes, or practicing harsh asceticism. They don't amount to true effacement. Real work is mental purification, erasing anger, envy, arrogance, hypocrisy, restlessness, etc., and cultivating wholesome opposites. Yeah, thank you, Christopher. The Buddha pointed this out many times, didn't he? And I really appreciate you bringing this in to conclude that it is not the ways we live as monastics or as lay people, friends. It's not the austerities. It's not the kind of clothes we wear, the kind of food we eat, the ways in which we move and act in our day that are determined by us as wholesome, that actually make the difference alone. They can be very helpful, these practices, these ways of considering how we relate to the world, but we can be dressed in the robes of a monk, we can be living in the forest, we can be living a very ascetic life, and we can still be subject to these defilements that you mentioned, all these qualities, unwholesome qualities. The work is to know that. The work is to allow ourselves to investigate that. So very true. The externals are not so important. They have a place. There is a significance. There is a value in determining to practice in good ways, the ways in which we live our lives. But always the importance must be given to the purification of the heart that we've been discussing today. Yeah, thank you, Christopher. Thank you all, friends, for your kind attention and your time and your practice. My very good wish for each one of us to keep rubbing away, keep scratching away at the defilements. Let's conclude, friends, by paying homage to our teacher, the Buddha, with 3 heartfelt sadhus. Sadhu, 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 animadami.